Hello, welcome back to Hunter Tuned. I'm out at the shop tonight working on the EF a little bit, and I wanted to kind of talk about some of the things that I'm planning on doing to it and try to make a little bit more of a plan on what I want to do, because I might use some parts from the EF on the Mustang and maybe take some of the Mustang parts and put it on the EF, just because if you guys know, this car had a tucked radiator setup, which is actually sitting over here. I removed it to kind of get a better picture of how I want stuff to mount on this car, because currently the lower support it's kind of janky. I'm sure I could brace this and beef it up a little bit, but there's just these tabs kind of bolted on the bottom to mount the radiator. So this is how the radiator was mounted onto these tabs right here, and then the hoses obviously held the top. There was nothing kind of bolting the top on, which I've gotten away with on a ton of stuff. I've just mounted the bottom, like intercoolers and stuff like that. I just kind of brace the bottom of it and then have the pipes or the hoses hold kind of some more rigidity to the rest of it. I did get my oil return line done, which this return line with a top mount gets a little tricky. So you guys can see I actually put a 45-degree bend off of the turbo here. Let me get a flashlight because that's not very easy to see. So you can see here that it's definitely a tight fit to try to make a return line work and not be kinked or anything. So I've done this on a couple top mounts now. I just run a 45-degree AN fitting and then snake it around and run it down into the pan like that. This isn't like bolted down or anything, and I still have to clock the turbo. So this actually doesn't touch anything when it's clocked where it needs to be. So yeah, return line, good to go. The feed line is already ran on this car, so I can just pop that on the top. That's not going to be a big deal. We're not going to run coolant lines on this turbo. I never run coolant lines on any turbo, even though they have the ports. I just don't do it. They tend to, at least from other people that have ran the coolant lines, they actually tend to have more issues when running the coolant lines to the turbo. And especially this car, it's going to be a drag racing car or just kind of street racing, stuff like that. I'm not going to be like road racing the thing where the turbo is going to like overheat. And from my experience running the coolant lines to the turbo, actually ends up heating the engine coolant up higher than you would like. So that's kind of my reasoning why I don't run the coolant lines. So oil lines pretty much done, but my next step on this car is I have to figure out how to run intercooler piping, and I don't really have a kit here, so I probably got to order some couplers and stuff to be able to get the pipe to come off of here at an angle, or get like a piece to weld on here so it kicks it out and down and then can snake through here and go to the intercooler right up here. Same thing on this side. It's going to be a tight bend going straight up next to the battery box. That's why this is all cut out from the previous setup. So I want to kind of clean up a lot of this, metal that's sitting up here. I don't know how I'm going to do it yet. My extent of fabrication and making like core supports and radiator supports and stuff like that is literally just like flat stock. I know how to work with flat stock and butt stuff up and weld it and brace it, but it doesn't usually look good. But I think anything's going to be better than this. So I might just get like, I don't know, maybe I could even do tubing somehow up here. Another thing too is I have to fix 2 more broken exhaust manifold bolts. I got all these ones fixed, and then there's a broken stud up here that I still have to fix. This had like all the freaking exhaust manifold bolts on this thing were stripped. So got those fixed, and I fixed this transmission bolt because it was stripped, and this one is also stripped. So I have to figure out something with this, but I don't know. I don't think I'm gonna fix it, to be honest. Probably just gonna run the rest of them. If I'm missing just one, hopefully it'll be okay. But it's just little stuff like that that's kind of been driving me nuts with this thing that I would like to fix and make perfect. But at the end of the day, I also want to get it up and running so we can dyno it, because I know a lot of you have been waiting on seeing the results from this turbo kit versus the other turbo kit that we had on here. So I would like to get it done, at least kind of just throw it together to see how this setup's gonna run. I also got a different intercooler for the car. This is actually a 3.5 inch core intercooler. It's not very tall, but it's about the same physical size other than the thickness of the core as the old one. So we're changing to a thicker core intercooler, the 1320 top mount, and then the 5855 turbo from huntertune.com. And that's pretty much it, but I'm also trying to clean it up in the process. So like I said, tucked radiator setup is gonna be tricky while still trying to run an intercooler up here and be able to put the front bumper back on. The bumper that was on this car was all chopped up and didn't really fit that good. And the only way it fit was because the intercooler was so small, it could kind of tuck up under the bumper, but it was still not really fitting how I wanted it to. So I have to figure out a radiator setup for here. I would like to just put a half size in this car, but it's tricky with the way the headlight bucket and stuff sits up here to fit a half size. And with the wastegate sitting here, I don't have a ton of room to fit a half size. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to or not, but this tucked radiator that's over here is actually larger, not really needing this large of a radiator in the Civic here. And my Mustang runs a half size Civic radiator right now. So I was thinking about taking this radiator out and trying to somehow finagle it into the EF, and then taking the EF radiator and tucking it right here on the Mustang. I think that would fit awesome, and I would have more capacity on the cooling system for the Mustang, which needs it, and the EF doesn't. Because the half size radiator in the Mustang works, but it only works for a quarter-mile pass, and then it starts getting hot. Just because there's not a lot of surface area on this radiator to really utilize it. So if I had 2 fans on that radiator in this car, I think it would be perfect. And I want to go through more stuff on the Mustang and clean it up. We did just kind of throw this thing together. Doesn't really look like it, but I want to figure some stuff out on here too. So like the turbos on the Mustang, they're very close to the support right here. So I don't know how I can maybe get some airflow going to that turbo. This one's not so bad. I can actually probably just cut out a lot of this stuff and make a duct out the front for this turbo, but this turbo is definitely blocked up a little bit. And it's positioned like this because I wanted mandrel bent pipe all the way to the turbo, and the only way I could do that with the resources I had available at the time was to put the turbo right here. So like this turbo definitely sits off to that side a little bit more. If I had it tucked in closer, I don't know, maybe I'll just have to redo the hot side so this turbo gets tucked in closer. Maybe tuck that one in a little bit closer too. But then if the radiator's here, it's going to be sucking right off the radiator. So I think that's why a lot of these guys go angled like out. So it sucks air from out here instead of in here. I think that's why a lot of them guys do that, or they tuck them in the back so that turbos get colder air instead of sucking off the radiator. That's another reason why I went with the half size radiator on this car, is because I wanted the cold air to go around the radiator into the turbo and have the turbo not sucking hot radiator air. Because believe it or not, when you're trying to make 1,000 horsepower or more, that little stuff makes a big difference. Another thing too I want to do with this car is I want to be able to run a coolant pressure sensor, because last year this car's been a couple 860 passes at almost 160 miles an hour, and I started pushing water into the overflow, and I don't know if it's just because the radiator is way too small for this thing, and it just heat soaked enough to push the cap, because I ran 30 pounds of boost on my last pass just purposely to see if it would push water, and I got out of it right away, so I didn't let the engine temperature actually get warm, and it never pushed water. So if it was a head gasket failing, you would think it pushed water just with pressure, not with I think it's pushing water just because of the heat. It's just over soaking this little radiator. So, and I didn't really want to race the car anymore last year after that, because, well, I don't want water spraying under my tires, especially when you're going 160 miles an hour. So yeah, that's that. I want to also get some firewall stuff in the Mustang and clean up some of this, because I just have shit running through the firewall and there's gaps and holes in my firewall. So if anything did explode under the hood or a fire happened in here, it would go through the firewall and burn me. So I don't want that. So I'll probably have to pull the engine out of this thing to patch up the firewall, and then figure out bulkheads or something to like put on the firewall to run my lines through, like the wiring and the intercooler lines and stuff like that. The fuel lines are all underneath the car, so that wouldn't be an issue, but just little stuff like that I would like to clean up with this thing. Very proud of this car and I love it. Some more stuff with this thing that I want to do is the guy that did the cage, I wasn't really there, which is kind of my fault, when he mounted the steering wheel. The steering wheel sits kind of high in this car, and the seat also sits very high. So when I'm sitting in the car, with my helmet on and this seat that's in here, which I had this seat laying around, so I threw it in here, like even without a helmet on, my head hits the cage right here. So when my helmet's on, my head has to be tilted like this for it to not be like resting on the cage. So I'm sitting like this racing down the racetrack, which is not comfortable, but the height of the steering wheel works with this height of a seat. So if I lower the seat down so my head doesn't hit the cage, my steering wheel is going to be up high, up too high, and I can't see through the windshield that well. So, and that's another thing too with the cowl hood and the steering wheel being too high. If I lower the seat down, it's tricky to figure that stuff out. So I want to lower the steering wheel and the seat simultaneously, and then hopefully that issue will be resolved. And then I also want to clean up some of the wiring that's in here. It all works, but I want to make it just maybe look a little bit better. And then obviously, like I said, figure out the bulkheads in the firewall, so I can run the stuff through and patch up all the holes in the firewall. That would make me feel a lot better about trying to go faster than I already have in this thing. Like all the stuff back here is so nice. The parachute mount and the kill switch and the battery lugs and all that I really like, but gotta figure out some other little stuff. And the CO2 bottle being in the car, I mean, I think that's fine. Everybody runs a CO2 bottle in the car. I don't know if CO2 is necessarily flammable. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Not sure. But, and then I want to just build like a basic fire suppression system in the car and have an extinguisher mounted somewhere with like a valve that, like, if there ever was a fire, I can just like hit a valve and it'll spray extinguisher all over the car on the inside, so I can hopefully stop and get out kind of thing. So I want to mount some nozzles like on the cage. I don't know, I've never done any of this stuff, but I want to try to make it a little safer, so when I go out racing, I don't want to worry about stuff. I want to just be able to go out and have fun. So that's the plans for the Mustang. Other than that, like I said, I want to put a coolant pressure gauge in it, but I don't know if I can put it in the water pump. I feel like guys have issues with running them in the water pump and they get kind of screwed up signals. I don't know where else to put it. Bigger radiator, maybe not move the turbos or anything and just focus on suspension and stuff. I don't know. We'll see. This little thing, my 4-door, I have to put a clutch in, and the clutch is sitting in the back seat. And I was actually going to come out here today and do that, but I want to finish the EF before I move on to this thing. So just going to get a clutch put in this car and probably just drive it or go ice racing. Another reason why I'm kind of out here trying to get some of this stuff done is because the lake right now has 2 feet of ice and there's like no snow on the lake right now. So we could take the studded tires out with any of these cars and go have fun. I just have to get a set of 5-lug wheels that I can use on the Mustang and mount my 15-inch studded tires for the Mustang. I think it'd be funny just to maybe make a video taking the Mustang out on the ice, but I want to clean up a lot of this stuff before that. Yeah, you guys watched the last video with the Integra. It's still sitting on the dyno, but this thing is pretty much good to go. I just gotta clean up the tune a little bit once I go back to E85. And yeah, this thing is just awesome. The Integra is awesome. The EF also needs a gas tank, unfortunately, because it's leaking. I don't know if it's the tank that leaks or if it's the line coming out of the top by the fuel pump, but something is leaking fuel up there above a half a tank. So anything more than a half a tank and it's leaking fuel out of the something back here, you can see it's leaking from something. I don't know what, but maybe I'll just lower the tank down a little bit to figure that out. It might be the seam, because you can see the seam on the tank is kind of rusty, so the seam on the tank might be leaking, and the tank is just held in with a fucking ratchet strap on the one side. So I want to try to maybe fix that. And then needs maybe get some coilovers or something for it. And then the front suspension is pretty good on this thing. I mean, I'd probably just run it how it is, to be honest. And then hopefully like the clutch and everything is gonna hold on it, but we'll find out, I suppose. So yeah, little update for you guys on some of the projects and maybe some of my plans with them. I just kind of wanted to let you know with these things, and then hopefully when we get all those projects done, I can start working on my Cutlass that I want to LS swap. So those are kind of the plans for now. I'm probably gonna come out here tomorrow and try to knock out those broken studs on there. I would do it tonight, but I don't have the hardware to do it and the store's closed already. So, and then maybe figure out a radiator setup so I can mount the intercooler and mount the, because you gotta get the stuff mounted before you can plumb it. So I gotta get that mounted and whatever. Maybe I'll make a video on whatever I decide to do with that. And yeah, I want to get the Mustang back out. I'm kind of itching to get that thing fixed up again. So thanks for watching. Little video here, me blabbing. Have a great night and better tomorrow.